Hey everybody, this video is going to cover our week 6 assignments. We have 2 this week. There's a discussion forum, and since this is the last week of module 2, there is our exam for the week. I also want to point out that coming up next week, we will have a discussion forum, and your final opportunity to attend that group office hour is coming up next week during week 7. So be sure to get that on your calendar. Especially if you haven't been to one yet, if you have been to one yet and are finding them helpful, please come. So let's talk about our discussion forum first. What are we going to be chatting about this week? So we are in chapter 5 of our textbook, looking more at behavioral addictions. So we're looking at things like binge eating, shoppings, other disorders. And the challenging thing about this, well, one of the challenging things is that we can't often treat these with complete abstinence. That's not always possible, right? I can't just not eat food, right? And I say that term, and I'm not going to re-record this video because I think that it's important that we catch our language when we say it. So I don't mean just, right, as I'm comparing it to a substance use disorder, because to tell somebody, well, just stop drinking, right? If it were that easy, none of us would be in this course. So I tripped up there. I used the wrong language. And what I want to say is complete abstinence is not possible for many behavioral addictions. And sometimes that can be challenging because sometimes moderation, if you think about it in terms of a substance use disorder, sometimes moderation is really hard. I don't have the capacity for moderation. That's actually what told me that I had a problem with drinking, or I had a problem with my, with X, Y, or Z. So I'm going to work, part of my treatment plan is abstinence. Well, we can't do that with something like a feeding and eating disorder. We have to eat in order to live. So how do we do that? So it's interesting, I think, to start having those considerations. So your primary post, you've got 3 questions here to answer. So as you consider behavioral addictions and what you've learned about the brain in chapter 1, there was also a lot of supplemental material this week on the brain specific to eating disorders. Discuss why moderation might be more difficult than abstinence, and in what ways might abstinence be more difficult than moderation. So think about that not only in terms of like practical day-to-day life pieces, but also think about that in terms of the brain and how the brain works. How does the brain influence the answer to both of those questions? Number 2, describe concrete actions for someone suffering from one of these disorders to take to develop moderate behaviors. So as you've been reading about these challenges, what are some of the kind of solution-focused and strength-based ways that we might be able to help support our clients with? And lastly, what is the role of an LAC in helping a client to develop these behaviors? So what do you see as your role in supporting somebody who wants to make changes to their behaviors in these areas? So then your response posts needs to discuss, again, thinking about what the role of an LAC is in helping a client develop these moderate behaviors when addressing behavioral addictions. So think about the actions identified by you and your classmate in questions number 2 above as you consider the role of the LAC. So really, I'm asking the same thing twice here. So this is what we're going to do. I'm going to clarify. Your primary initial post is only going to cover questions 1 and 2. I'm going to take question number 3 off of that, and that's actually going to be the response post. So what is the role? So we're looking at we're looking at number 2 there, and we're looking at number 2 from the primary post. And in our response post, we are discussing what the role is of an LAC to help a client develop those behaviors, those moderate behaviors. Okay. So I'll clean up this assignment so that we can see that reflected accurately. So as you are answering these questions, be sure to cite course materials, incorporate, chapter 1 from your text, chapter 5 from your text, and if you're looking and discussing eating disorders in your post, look to the supplemental content that was posted as well. So posts again, do Wednesdays and Fridays. Confidentiality policy, grading rubrics are the same here. So post your discussions and let me know as questions arise how I can help you engage in this week's discussion forum. Before I sign off, let's talk about the exam that's due at the end of this module. The exam is very similar to the exam at the end of module 1. So let's click on it here. So it covers all of the content from module 2. So the chapters that we were assigned as well as the supplemental content. I will tell you that the exams do focus heavily on the textbook. You can take the exam anytime during week 6. So anytime between the October 3rd and October 7th. It does close at 11:59 p.m. on October 7th. So you have 90 minutes to complete the exam. If you have asked me if you have an ODE accommodation and have asked me for extended test time, I've entered that in there. It doesn't reflect here, but it will reflect when you start taking the exam. So be sure to set aside enough uninterrupted time so that you can complete the exam, because once you've started it, you can't exit it and come back in. The exam is worth 50 points. And there's no essay questions or anything you have to write. Questions are going to be things like multiple choice, true, false, fill in the blank, or matching. The exam is open book, open notes, so you can access any of your materials as you're taking the exam, but do just know that you are required to work independently and can't work with other people or each other to take the test. And lastly is submit the quiz when you're finished. If you don't hit that submit button, your answers may not be recorded and you will get a 0. So don't do that. Hit submit when you're done. That's it. So big week this week for assignments. So jump right in and head on over to that questions forum. Let me know how I can help. Thanks, everybody.